Hey guys, welcome back to the world of English exams. Today's video is going to explain you about pie chart and how to write a pie chart if you are taking the academic test. Today we shall also know some of the essential tips and tricks that you should know while writing a pie chart. If you want to understand the complete information along with a sample answer for pie charts, do stay tuned till the end of the video. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel World of English Exams. So let's get started with today's video by understanding the format of the writing test. So the writing test differs from academic to general, and in the academic test there are two tasks. The first task is a report, and pie chart comes under the report, and the task 2 is an essay. In the case of general training test, task 1 is a letter while task 2 is an essay. So the total time given to complete the writing test is 1 hour or 60 minutes. So make sure that you are completing both the tasks within the time, and for that you have to allot 20 minutes for completing task 1, whether it is a report or a letter, and 40 minutes should be the time for task 2. Ideally, this is how you have to divide the time. So now let's get started with the types of reports, and then I'll tell you how to write a pie chart. So the various kinds of reports that you have to prepare while preparing for your academic writing test are bar charts, pie charts, line graphs, maps, tables, flow charts, diagrams, life cycles and combinations. So these are the different kinds of reports, and I would strongly recommend you to watch our videos on each of these reports with sample answers on our YouTube channel World of English Exams while preparing, so that you get a concise idea of how to write it in the simplest way possible by representing all the data that you see. So now let's continue with learning about pie charts, and as I told you, I would start the video by talking about some of the essential points to remember while attempting pie charts, and then we will look at the structure and a sample answer. So I hope all of you guys are ready to learn. Okay, so these are the points to remember. The first thing to do is interpret the pie chart properly. If you are unable to do so, then you will represent the information, but it might not be appropriate to the figure what is given to you. So always whenever you write any statistical data, whether it is bar chart or line graph or pie chart, it is very important for you to interpret the graph properly. Then this will give you an idea as to which point to include and which point to delete or omit. So this is a very important caution to be taken, guys. If you go on writing it and represent all the data that you see, then definitely it's not a very recommended factor for getting a high score. So do interpret the graph properly, whether it is pie chart, line graph or bar chart. Then the second point is very important. You need to identify whether the given graph is a static one or a dynamic one. Now what is meant by static and what is meant by dynamic? Static means it is steady, which means that you will see the data which is pertaining to one single year. For example, the sales of a motorcycle in the year 2008. So you can see that the year is the same. So we are not progressing from one year to another. So that is called as a static graph. On the other hand, a dynamic graph is the one which compares two different points of time or two different years of study. So in this case, I am going to tell you how to write a pie chart based on a dynamic illustration that you can see. So let's see. Note the units of measurement properly. This is a very important point in order to achieve a 7 band or higher. So if you want to get that score for mainly for introduction part of the report, you have to note the units of measurement. There are several units of measurement like percentages, meters, grams, etc. So make sure that you are noting that down. Now where can you find that data? So you can get the data about the units of measurement along the y-axis, or it will also be given in the illustration or in the question. So make sure that you are representing that correctly. This is a very important point, and not to forget, you also have to mention the legends. So legends are nothing but the data which is represented. What is the data about? So that is called a legend. You should mention that as well in the introduction. Now, summarize the main values that you see. This is the second important point that I wanted to stress. You should not write all the things that you see. You have to carefully identify which ones are important and which ones you can exclude while writing a report. If you can do that, then definitely we are looking at a target score of over 8. Then never skip writing an overview. This is a very important point, guys. You have to write an overview in the report. What is an overview? Basically, the overview is the summation, or I can say the gist of what you see. So this overview represents the highest values, the lowest values, and if there are any significant variations or fluctuations or any significant differences that you can see, you have to represent those things as well. But you should not represent any values. I repeat, when you are writing an overview, never write any values. And let's move on to the subsequent points that you have to keep in mind while writing a pie chart. So the next point is divide the response into 2 or 3 body paragraphs, not more than that, because essentially we are targeting a word count of 150. So if you write too much and divide the body paragraphs, then you might miss on what is called cohesion. So cohesion is your ability to link the ideas together and form a paragraph. So your ability to write and jot down the points together is called cohesion, which will miss if you break the data into too many body paragraphs. So I would suggest you to write just 2 or 3 body paragraphs at the max. So let's move on to the next point. Have you seen that I have highlighted this point? Because this is a very, very important thing to bear in mind. Use the appropriate tense. So by virtue of what you can see, you have to represent the data using the right tense. For example, let's say the data is studied between 2000 and 2003. So both the years of study are in the past, hence you have to use the past tense while writing the report. If you skip this and use the present tense, then you would be losing marks for grammar, and this can be a serious mistake which can lower your score drastically. So you have to use the right tense. This can be evident from the title of the graph itself, or you can see the years of study. If no years of study are mentioned, then you can treat it as the present tense, and you can represent all the data using present tense. Now the next point, avoid mentioning the information that is not seen. This is something called off topic. So if you deduce any conclusions or write something which is not represented on the graph, then definitely you will be deviating from the central idea or the central theme of writing the report. Hence this will be a lowering factor for your scores. So never mention something that you don't see. Next, conclusion and opinion need not be given. People generally start giving their opinions, guys, but that is a very, very bad thing to do. So you should never give your opinion. This is not an essay. I would say to write the opinion in the essay, whether it is a passive opinion or the active opinion, but not in a report. Please refrain yourself from writing an opinion. Of course, conclusions also need not be written. There is no harm even if you write a conclusion, but anyway we are writing the overview. So in that we are going to represent all the significant things that you see on the graph. So essentially the conclusion is not required. Then I was previously mentioning about the word count, which should be a minimum of 150. But aim for 180 to 200 words at the maximum, because this is something called the appropriate length for this task. And if you write below 150 words or under 150 words, it would be considered as under length, and this is one of the penalizing factors in the report. Then of course, the last but not least, you have to follow a good structure. So following a structure not only makes your information flow in a logical way, showing overall progression, but you will also be able to signpost. You will be able to show the reader that you know what to represent and how to represent the data as well. So now, having known the important points, let's look at the structure for a report. For any report, this is what is the structure that we are looking at. Introduction, the first paragraph, in which you need to mention the paraphrase statement as well as the units. I remember. I would tell you all to remember that the introduction should contain the paraphrase statement as well as units. Then the second paragraph, as I was mentioning, is the most important one when you are writing any report, and that is called the overview. In this paragraph, you are going to represent the significant points like the highest value, the least value, or I must say the least pointer. Do not mention any values here. And if there are any significant ups and downs or fluctuations, you may have to mention that in one sentence. Do not extend this paragraph too much. It is not an essay, so you have to concise it and write a maximum of 3 sentences, I would say. And in the introduction, you can write 1 or 2 sentences. If it is a flow chart or a diagram, obviously you wouldn't see any figures or any statistics, so you need not write the second statement, that is units of measurement. You can only write the paraphrase statement in the introduction, and in the overview you can mention the different stages or how many stages are there, and you can briefly talk about the starting point and the ending point. Now moving on to the third paragraph, which is body paragraph 1, and the fourth one is called body paragraph 2. So these two body paragraphs are in essence of what you want to represent in the report, and you can classify it based on similarities and differences, or you can talk about one country in one body paragraph and the other country in the other body paragraph. This is called variable structure, variable number 1 and variable number 2. So like this you have to write the report, and you will see that once you practice writing with this structure and by using these tips that we have just discussed, you will see that your report proceeds in a much simpler way, and you can complete it within the set span of 20 minutes. Now let's analyze a sample question. Now that we have known everything, let's see how to use this structure to write a pie chart report, a report based on the pie chart. So now let's look at the sample question. The pie charts below show the spending of a school in the UK from 1991 to 2001. I'm sorry, 1981 to 2001. So we are looking at a 20-year duration, a 20-year period. So once again I repeat, the pie charts below show the spending of a school in the UK from 1981 to 2001. So this is what is the statement given to us. Now how are we supposed to paraphrase it? We are going to look at it when we are writing the introduction, and summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Now this is a common statement that you see in every question, that is, you have to summarize the information only by selecting the main ones, and you have to make comparisons where relevant. You have to do this, guys. And of course the minimum word count goes as 150. So write at least 150 words. So as and when you look at the question, you understand that the first phrase, the pie charts below. So definitely in the question paper you are able to see an illustration, whereas you are not writing any, you are not drawing any illustration in the answer sheet, right? So please do avoid the word below. Do not write that word below. Instead you can write the given pie chart or the given pie charts. Okay, so and it's talking about expenditure or the patterns of spending of a school in the UK. So now let's see how to what are the pie charts given and how we can analyze it. Okay, so these are the 3 pie charts that are given. As you can see the chart title, the first one is telling total school spending in 1981. Then the next figure shows total school spending in 1991, and the last one shows total school spending in 2001. Okay, so these are the 3 pie charts which we have to compare. Now let's look at what are the legends here. The first thing says teachers' salaries. Even here the first thing says teachers' salaries, and similarly teachers' salaries. So this is occupying the highest part. As you can see, the part of the pie which is represented in green is dominating in all the 3 years of study. So this is one of the significant features that you see. Next, talking about the least spending, you can see that the part of the pie in orange is showing the least amount here, 2%, which is insurance. Same thing here, insurance is the least, and the amount spent for insurance was the least here. So you have to represent that the teachers' salaries accounted for the highest proportion of spending, whereas insurance amounted for the least spending in all the years of study. That will be written in the overview. Now, what are the other categories that you see? Furniture and equipment, and resources like books, and other workers' salaries. So, there are 5 categories which are mentioned: teacher salaries, furniture and equipment, resources, other workers' salaries, and insurance. Automatically, the first 2 factors, the largest amount of expenditure can be seen for teacher salaries and other workers' salaries. So here also we are able to see teacher salaries and other workers' salaries are occupying the major proportion of money. So I think logically we can represent the teacher salaries and other worker salaries in one body paragraph, and furniture, equipment, resources and insurance in the second body paragraph, logically, right? So the highest features in one paragraph and the other features in the second body paragraph. Now as we can see that the teacher salaries, which amounted for 40% of the salaries, slowly increased to 50% in the next 10 years, but it dropped down by 5% over the next decade. So 40 to 50 to 45, that should be represented in one sentence. Now let us see what happened to furniture and equipment. 15%, it has drastically decreased by 10%, and that is from 15 to 5, the difference is 10%, and then it increased to 23%. So the highest proportion of spending for this category is seen in the final year of study, that is 2001. Then coming to the case for resources, example books. So this started at 15%, then went up to 20% as you can see here, and then again it declined or dropped to 9%. Then what about other workers' salaries? Started at 28% in 1981, then went down by 6% to 22%, and later in the final year it further decreased to 15%. So it gradually decreased 28 to 22 to 15. Finally, insurance 2%. It went up by 1%. So a minimal change is seen in this throughout the 10-year period, and later it increased by 5%. That is, it climbed to 8%. So this is how you have to represent it. So logically, I would go with teacher salaries and other worker salaries in one body paragraph, and the rest of the 3, that is insurance, books and furniture and equipment, will be represented in the second body paragraph. I'll keep giving you time, guys, so please grab a paper and a pencil and start writing the paragraphs along with me. So as and when I show you the structure, I will keep giving you 1 minute or 2 minutes of time. So, and I want everybody to write it. If you do not have a paper and pencil ready, you may also leave a comment in the comment section below, and I will check your reports for you. Now let's get started by writing the introduction. So the introduction would look something like this. The given pie charts compare the annual expenditure of a school in the United Kingdom in 3 years, 1981, 1991 and 2001. The expenses were calculated in percentages. So this is how you write the introduction, in which you paraphrase the given chart title. Here the pie chart show is given, and I have written the given pie charts. Here they have used the word show, and here I use the word compare. And in the question it's given the spending of a school in the UK. So, and I have written the expenditure of a school in the United Kingdom. Then instead of writing in the UK, I have represented in the United Kingdom. Then they have given the question that from 1981 to 2001, I have written it as in 3 years, 1981, 1991 and 2001. And what I got from the chart title is that all the units of measurement were percentages. That's what I have represented. The expenses were calculated in percentages. Now I will give you 1 minute of time to write the introduction, and this is the chart title, and your 1 minute time begins now. Thirty seconds up. Fine. So that is the end of your 1 minute time. I hope by now all of you might have written the introduction. Very good. Now let's proceed to the next paragraph, that is the overview. And as I was mentioning, the overview paragraph should contain the highest values and the lowest values. So here we have clearly understood that teachers' salaries amounted for the highest proportion of spending in all the 3 years, while insurance accounted for the lowest values. So now let's represent that. Overall, so every time you start writing the overview, you have to use this linking word, that is overall. Overall, it is clearly evident from the charts that the teachers' salaries accounted for the largest proportion of the amount spent by the school in all the years, while the least proportion was spent on insurance over the 20-year period. In one sentence, I have represented what I have seen. So I am seeing that the highest values, and here I am using the past tense because the 3 years of study were 1981, 1991 and 2001 respectively. So once again I'll read it. Overall, it is clearly evident from the charts that the teacher salaries accounted for the largest proportion of the amount spent by the school in all the years, while the least proportion was spent on insurance over the 20-year period. This is as simple as that, and as you can see, I did not represent any figures here. I did not write any numbers. So do start writing it, and your time of 1.5 minutes starts now. One minute to go. Thirty seconds more. Fine. So having understood how to write the overview, let's segregate the information into two body paragraphs, where I am going to describe the teacher's salaries and the other workers' salaries in the first body paragraph, and in the second body paragraph we are going to talk about furniture and equipment, resources and insurance. So now let's see how to write it. In the year 1981, 40% of the school's annual budget was allocated towards paying the salaries for teachers. So in the year 1981, what happened? 40% of the school's expenditure was on teacher salaries. Then what happened to this 10 years later? It has increased to 50% and then to 45%. That's what I am representing it. So 40% of the school's annual budget was allocated towards paying the salaries for teachers, which rose to 50% 10 years later, but fell to 45% by 2001. That is it, only one sentence. Now I am going to write the expenses incurred on paying the salaries for other workers. At the beginning of the study, it was at 28%, and after 10 years, it was 22%, and later it was 15%. So 28, 22 and 15. Okay, so let's see how to write. The expenses incurred on paying the salaries for other workers decreased from 28% in 1981 to 22% within a decade, and further to 15% by the final year. So have you seen how crisp and short is the body paragraph, but I have represented the information properly. Now again I am giving you 2 minutes of time to write this body paragraph. You may analyze it from this representation, and your time begins now. You have 1 more minute to write. Thirty seconds more. Okay, so now let's progress to writing the second body paragraph. Okay, the amount spent on insurance rose from just 2% in 1981 to 8% in 2001. So I'm just writing the initial year and the final year here. So the amount spent on insurance, we can see that initially it was 2%, but by the final year it has risen to 8%. That's what I have written. Then the pie chart showed that the proportion of money expended on furniture and equipment was 15% initially, which declined by 10%, which means the difference is 10%. So initially it was 15% on furniture equipment, which declined by 10%. That means it came to 5%, and later it increased to 23%. And then increased to 23% in 2001. Finally, resources such as books accounted for 15% of the total expenditure in 1981. However, this figure dropped down to 9% 20 years later. So, on books it started at 15%, and by the final year it dropped down to 9%. So have you seen how well the graph is represented? So this is how you have to write it, guys. I hope you found this structure helpful, but before I close it, I will be giving you 1.5 minutes of time to write the structure for body paragraph 2. Start. You have 1 minute of time to go. Thirty seconds more. Fine. So that is the end of the report, and if you put all the body paragraphs, the introduction and overview together, this is how the report will look like. The given pie charts compare the annual expenditure of a school in the United Kingdom in 3 years, 1981, 1991 and 2001. The expenses were calculated in percentages. Overall, it is clearly evident from the charts that the teachers' salaries accounted for the largest proportion of the amount spent by the school in all the years, while the least proportion was spent on insurance over the 20-year period. In the year 1981, 40% of the school's annual budget was allocated towards paying the salaries for teachers, which rose to 50% 10 years later, but fell to 45% by 2001. The expenses incurred on paying the salaries for other workers decreased from 28% in 1981 to 22% within the decade, and further to 15% by the final year. The amount spent on insurance rose from just 2% in 1981 to 8% in 2001. The pie chart showed that the proportion of money expended on furniture and equipment was 15% initially, which declined by 10% and then increased to 23% in 2001. Finally, resources such as books accounted for 15% of the total expenditure in 1981. However, this figure dropped down to 9% 20 years later. So I hope all of you liked this video and you found it useful. So please do comment and like this video and share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel World of English Exams, and we will be posting such useful and informative videos in the coming future as well. So happy preparation, guys.